and also talking about my siblings and their accomplishments. Actually, my sister Jenny, her show is called Eco Sense for Living. It's aired in 70 markets, public broadcasting, and she just won an Emmy. And my brother Rhett just won 2 Emmys for a documentary about the Chattahoochee River called Chattahoochee Unplugged. They took out a dam on the Chattahoochee River, and he documented that. And he's quite the filmmaker. He's actually making 2 additional documentaries for public broadcasting, one on indigo snakes and one on the longleaf pine wiregrass ecosystem. And they're these tortoises called gopher tortoises, and they're actually they live in Florida and South Georgia, and they live to be 100 years old. And because there's so much development, the developers are coming in and actually paving over the tortoise, their homes. And so the tortoises are trapped down in these homes. And my brother is documenting this and also trying to rescue the tortoises before they get buried. So, and my brother Teddy, he's amazing too, because he's a school teacher. And he's very passionate about working with children. And this is my Republican brother. And every summer, you know, he gets his time off in the summer. And he has this boat, this ship, a wooden ship. And he takes at-risk youth out on the ocean to learn about biology and to learn about being good stewards of the ocean. He's a great sailor too. But he turned in the sailboat basically for the school teaching position, and he teaches economics. But I just wanted to throw that in. I mean, they really are remarkable, and Dad has certainly inspired us all the way along. And I guess, Todd, you're supposed to be asking questions, and we have a certain amount of time before I know Dad has to leave. So why don't you start?
Well, one thing I want to say to preface some questions is at this conference, too, we're all talking about things that last, that are important that last. We're talking ultimately about how we can think beyond intergenerations, or think beyond generations intergenerationally. And if we do good deeds and they end in one generation, what good are they? And what you have as an example here with the Turner family is the family foundation model has worked well. And I think the lesson is that you can either be incredibly privileged or you can have lesser means. But what they do is they get together and they talk about decisions with the resources that they have, which is something that all of us can do. It's something that's inspired my own family, because the 2 resources we have are monetary and time. And you can get together and figure out how to harness those things, so when we hear Ted Roosevelt and Tom Steyer and others talking about how we can engage, that's an immediate way to engage, and I think the Turner clan, again, personifies that. So I'd like to just start with a question for John R. and Laura, and that is, what kind of influence has Ted Turner had on shaping your ethic that you pursue for pursuing conservation?
I would say that he's had an impact on millions of people around the globe, but what he did for his children is he really got us out in nature. I'm sure you've heard of nature deficit disorder, Last Child in the Woods, Richard Louv. Americans spend 90% of their time indoors, and kids are in front of a screen 8 to 10 hours a day, which is just mind-blowing. So if kids don't have the opportunity to get out in nature, then how can they learn to respect it and understand it and love and care for it? So that was a very important thing that Dad gave all his children and now his grandchildren. He takes us on an environmental retreat every year. We've been to Africa, we've been to Hawaii, went to Yellowstone this year. He's to the Galapagos, and all his grandchildren come along. And what's really kind of unique is that instead of going and sitting on a beach and drinking Mai Tais, here we are following behind him like little ducks with the grandchildren picking up garbage And I don't like to call it garbage. Dad calls it garbage, but I think it's a generational thing, because most of what you pick up on the beach is plastic, and we know what you do with plastic, right? You recycle it. But anyway, so he's impacted me so much. My husband and I built the first LEED certified home in Atlanta. I've been on the board of League of Conservation Voters for 13 or 14 years. I'm very passionate about politics. I think politics is everything. We're 6 seats away from losing the Senate firewall, like with Mark Udall. He's in a huge race. You've heard a lot about how important politics is. And then bringing it to the state level, I'm very passionate about a lot of things. When he started Captain Planet, the cartoon. How many of you in this room, you're pretty old in this room, right? But there are a few of you that are Planeteers and watch the cartoon. But it was seen around the world in 100 countries in 23 different languages, and it taught kids about how to be great stewards. And it's
right.
true.
That's
And
right.
there were 10 episodes about energy and climate and air pollution. And the first episode was actually about oil spill, offshore oil spill, and how it mucked up the shore and, oiled all the animals. And then he started a foundation that made grants to school groups in all 50 states, 23 countries, that gave children an opportunity to experience hands-on environmental projects and be out in nature and learn experientially. And after 23 years, the millionth child has been directly funded, and there have been 7 million children impacted. Restoring wetlands and river systems, helping endangered species, working through technology to solve problems. There's been Lahutton cutthroat trout reintroduction programs for little kids who grow the fry in the classroom and then go and take them out to the stream and release them. And 2 grantees that just to the presentation we saw before on what's going on in Africa with endangered species. These 2 kids, through social media, went and reached 10,000 children around the world, and they received these letters and personally handed them over to the president of South Africa. Their foundation was a recipient of Captain Planet funds. And, engaging youth, and I've just taken over this whole thing, but engaging youth is like one of the most important things that we can do. And he's set it was his brainchild, and I encourage you to go watch the Captain Planet episodes. They're still out there on Boomerang, they're online, and if you're a Planeteer, join the Planeteer movement on Facebook. It's 600,000 youth strong. They're millennials. These kids that grew up in the 90s watching it, they've infiltrated every business sector, and they're moving up and making decisions, and they have a conservation and an environmental ethic, and they're going to change the world.
Absolutely. And just to expand on that real quick before I say how much of an influence Grandpa's been on my life, social media is just, it's not going to be all Kim Kardashian and cat videos. It's going to be the way, and it is the way, for many students around the United States and youth to connect to one another with issues that truly, truly matter, that you're truly passionate about, that really adds towards that 3 to 5% chance that Grandpa's given it, even though I think it's a little bit higher than that now.
Could be.
I think so. Talking with all these smart people around this, I think it's a lot higher than a 5% chance. Absolutely. And so Grandpa's been my Captain Planet. He embodies everything. And so whenever I make a decision, I say, not what Captain Planet would do in this situation, it's what would Grandpa do? And I mean, I've had such great role models from my parents and from my entire family, and it all started with my grandfather on this side making the right decisions. Maybe not always the most popular, maybe not always the best rated. Some people might even berate him for it. But at the end of the day, he's a hero to not just me, but his legacy is going to last to not just me, not to just my not to just my cousins, but to millions and millions of children and around the planet and to youth and your spirit, your commitment to the planet and to the human survival and to everything, save everything, is much appreciated. Thanks, Grandpa.
Thank you.
Are we done?
That
No.
really is a life-changing experience to hear those wolves howl, to go out in the middle of it looks like a Bierstadt painting. There are no electrical lines. There are no white people besides us. We could use a few more indigenous people in the picture, but the bison roaming free and the elk and the wolves in a complete and intact ecosystem. The trees are starting to come back, the aspen and the trees, because they're wolves, because they control the numbers of the elk, who were decimating the young growth of the forest, the regrowth. So it really is very powerful, and if you ever have the chance to do it, I highly, highly recommend it.
Absolutely.
This is a question for John R. Talk about what really fires you up these days of what you've been doing at DU.
Oh, man. So everything, gosh, there's so many problems nowadays. But the good news is there's a lot of solutions to go and meet it. As an engaged youth and as a motivated youth, because what's more motivating than my future friends, my future children, being completely and totally in peril, the whole human species being in peril. Because it's not the planet. The planet's going to be here after, if we're gone. The planet's going to be fine. It's going to be us, and we can save ourselves. So Grandpa taking a lead, especially in energy, that's what fires me up. That's what I want to do when I get out of college, is I want to, as Turner Renewable Energy has worked with Southern Company as a partner, you hug the people who wouldn't be leaning towards renewables. But now I'm going to be working for them for the last month in the renewable energy sector. And I think we're going to keep on expanding, and I know we're going to keep on expanding as that time goes. And when you can't raise bison, when you have to take 4,000 bison out of the herd, in places like New Mexico that have experienced multiple years of drought, I think it's up to 10 years now, what's going to replace it? And yes, ecotourism is going to be a very big part of the innovative way we make revenue from the ranches, so we can keep them in permanent conservation. But adding to our portfolio and to our impact on the planet, I think that renewable energy is the way that I am going to change the world, and maybe even use it as a political backing later in life. But no, that's later. But I'm very excited. That's what gets me fired up. Obviously renewables. We're going to depend on energy. That's energy gives us a road to a higher quality of life. It gives us a road to connect with one another using social media, whether it's policy issues, whether it's holding our politicians accountable. And it gets us fired up. It gets us passionate. It gets youth off their butts, and it gets them having a voice on these policy issues that matter. And so that's what I want to do. Bring energy and make it non-carbon sources.
This is a question for both Laura and Ted, and a little side note. When you're working on a book with Ted Turner, he never disappoints you in providing great fodder. He said, and what's important for this meeting is, he was quoted as saying, if you were in charge of the world, you would not allow men to serve in public office for a century.
Men.
Men.
It'd be okay for women too.
Right.
Women, I think, would cut the military budget down and put the money into health care and education where it would do more good.
Absolutely.
Laura, you've been involved in Atlanta in trying to broaden the discussion, bringing moms into the conservation movement, and also working with people like the Reverend Gerald Durley to broaden the discussion on climate change. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. Just briefly. You know, this room is not diverse, right? You know, there's a big gap. Atlanta happens to be the mecca of the civil rights movement. And they're used to, with the civil rights movement, being part of the headlights. They don't like being the taillights. So it was about back in 2005 when Al Gore featured his film, An Inconvenient Truth. There was another film called The Great Warming. And they premiered at the same time. And in Atlanta, we actually invited faith-based clergy, a lot of them African American, to witness this film. And ever since then, we had several faith-based leaders, African American, make commitments to because it became for them the moral issue of their time. You know, protecting the least of these, protecting children, is absolutely, absolutely critical. And ever since then, Dr. Gerald Durley has been on the road. He's been working with the Southern Alliance for Clean Energy, Obama's Climate Action Plan, and other nonprofits about traveling around the globe, writing stories, talking about how green, renewable energy is absolutely critical, because we are actually putting the poor and the children in harm's way. They're the ones that are paying with their lives and their health. And so he really has ramped it up. John Lewis, our ninth-time congressman in Georgia, says that the environmental movement is the next great global movement, and that it's the evolution of the civil and human rights movement. And he's out on the road talking about this. Reverend Warnock, who is the head pastor at Martin Luther King's church, Ebenezer Baptist Church, hosted something on the front steps of the church for 1,000 people. It was a press conference around Obama's Climate Action Plan. And so you see the community really rallying. And as far as moms go, moms are worried about their kids because they're just flat out sick. There are high rates of asthma, childhood cancer, ADHD, obesity, diabetes, you name it, it's escalating around the country. And up every year, year on year, even autism. And where is that coming from? It's the chemicals in our air, our land, our water, our food, and the products that we use. And moms are learning about this. Environmental Working Group, if you haven't been to their website, ewg.org, are actually forcing companies to voluntarily change the ingredients in their products because they're toxic. For instance, Johnson & Johnson's baby products, a year ago, they took the formaldehyde out. It takes 26 seconds for what you put on your skin to go directly into your bloodstream. And I see the please end sign. But, you know, I started an organization called Mothers and Others for Clean Air. We've got all the healthcare institutions, the public health institutions, the child advocacy institutions, the American Lung Association, the PTA, Physicians for Social Responsibility, and we made the connection between all these public health officials and dirty outdoor air and how it was poisoning our kids. And you know who's been supporting the clean power plan with the EPA, the carbon emission reductions that the EPA is proposing? The American Lung Association. It has to be about health. When you saw the media panel yesterday, Jennifer Rigby from the Weather Channel said, well, our watchers, our audience doesn't want to see anything about climate change. Well, if you make it about kids' health, all of a sudden, you're going to have a lot of people tuning in because it affects their health and affects their children's health. So, you know, that's another thing that we're doing. And then Katie Kirk, you have to see her new film called Fed Up, and it's all about how we're making our kids sick and how our public schools in this country, 80% of them have contracts with soda companies, 50% of them have contracts with fast food. We are making our kids sick, and moms are getting into schools and saying, we are fed up and this isn't going to work anymore. And gardens in schools are absolutely critical, because kids will eat healthy food if and when they grow it themselves. It's very empowering. They get over fear of eating vegetables, fear of bugs, germs, and dirt, nature. So it's even the teachers get over their fear of it. And it's just a brilliant thing. So if you want a garden in your school or you want activities for your kids, go online, apply for a grant, CaptainPlanetFoundation.org. Thank you.
Thank you.
And just to quote Grandpa real quick one more time, the next fortunes are going to be made in renewable energy. So let's get Grandpa back in the game, and let's get renewable energy going back in this family, and let's get back to the top. We're gonna buy back CNN. Let's do this. Right?
And the Braves.
And the Braves.
Okay.
So you can see why when somebody asks Ted what is his greatest accomplishment, you know what he says? His family. And so this is why we want to present the Turner family, all of those who aren't here as well as those who are here, because they all have the same energy and the same passion. The legacy, the AREI Legacy Award.